for such a tricky and creative question and the whole session of table topics contest. Now, did you have fun?
Yes!
Great. We are all here for some kind of development. It's different for each of us. And now it's time for some learning. Let me introduce our next speaker, who will be doing a workshop. She graduated from the University of Southern California with a degree in communication and started a dance retail business in 2011. For the next 5 years, she rose to become one of the highest pawned shoe selling companies in the United States. For the second time on the stage, let's welcome an award-winning public speaker, Josephine Lee, with her workshop.
Part of the event today, so feel free to raise your hands and ask questions, because we're going to be covering several different topics today, and we have about an hour, so we can just kind of go with the flow. Okay. All right, so the first several things that I want to talk about. How many of you have seen I Will Be There? Okay, so I Will Be There was the final speech that I gave. Okay, so you might not be able to use that. Okay, so in I Will Be There, one of the storylines was about a gas tank story. Are you familiar with those that have watched it? So the gas tank story is where my friend and I, when we were 16 years old, I first started driving, and we ran out of gas, and my car stopped. And my best friend, I called her to come save me, because I didn't want to ask my parents to come save me. And my friends came, and we went to the gas station. Is this called gas station?
Yeah.
Okay, so we went to the gas station to get the little red canister. Are you familiar with what that is? Okay, so because we didn't know what to do. This was the first time I ran out of gas. And then Jenna's dad, my best friend's dad, he told us to go, and then we bought a can of gas, and then we went back to the car. I filled up the car, and then I turned on the engine, but it didn't turn on. And I filled it up again, and then I turned on my car, and it didn't turn on. So we were trying to figure out what happened. And then Jenna opens up the gas tank. She smells it, and she goes, "Josephine, did you put any gasoline in here?" And I said, "But I thought it was already in there. Was it not already in there?" She's like, "Didn't you notice that the canister was late?" I said, "Well, yeah, but I thought that's why it's called gas." So in my story, after I gave that speech, a lot of people, the first question that people asked me was, "Is this a true story? Did you actually think there was gas in the tank?" And I said, "No, I made that up." But the second question I usually get is, "How long have you been a Toastmaster?" What they're actually asking is, how long do I have to be a Toastmaster until I get into the finals, right? So the short answer to that question is, I've been a Toastmaster for about 4 years. But the more complicated answer is that I've really been preparing my entire life to be a Toastmaster, because I was a dancer, and then I went to broadcasting, all of that. But there are certain things that all of you have been doing your entire lives that are going to help you become a better Toastmaster. And each one of you have something very special that cannot translate to anyone else. Like, for example, you rode horses when you were younger. I'm sure there's something that you can take from what you have done, and that is really your secret sauce. I can teach you the topics that you can talk about. I can teach you about the structure. I can teach you about how to deliver humor. But the most important thing of all is that you have to take your own special secret sauce and put it into your speech and your own experiences. Now, did anybody watch the second place winner, Aaron Beverly's speech? Okay, so Aaron Beverly won second place. He's fantastic. And his special sauce, he's been competing in Toastmaster for about 4 or 5 years. And this is the first time he went to the finals and he won second place. But his special sauce is that he's a data analyst. So he is very exact. So what he did was studied every single world championship that ever existed, and he figured out the formula to write a speech. Now he is very analytical, so that was his secret sauce. That's not I did not watch a lot of the speeches at all, but that's what his special sauce was. But figure out what you are good at, what you've done, and it can be a skill that you learn from your work, or it could be a hobby that you had growing up. But whatever it is, figure that out first, and that is going to be the best thing you can do for your speech. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is working with a coach. Now, this is something that I talked to you about. Working with a coach is not only amazing because they've already gone through it before, but because each speech is very different. Now, Toastmasters speaking style is very different than giving a keynote, and that's very different than giving a TED Talk. Does TED Talk? Okay, than a TED Talk. And there's this thing called Moth in the United States, and that's a different type of speaking style. So depending on who your audience is and what type of event that is, it's a very different speech. So working with a Toastmasters coach, there is a specific formula for the contest speech. And today we're going to be covering a little bit more about contest speeches for Toastmasters. This is what we call a show speech. So this is a little bit more performance-based, a little bit more than informative, or TED Talks are a little bit more informative and entertaining, and Toastmaster speech is a little bit more shows, right? So the way that I chose my coach was that I've known him before, and to pick the right coach for you, you have to really understand yourself very well. So what are you already good at? So I knew that from years of dancing that my strength was in performance, and I needed help in creating content, so the writing portion of it. So I had to pick a coach that I knew I loved his writing. So I picked a coach I knew, I've read his blogs before, I've read his speeches before, and I knew that I really wanted to I would get help from his writing. So that's something that you want to think about. What do you need help in? What are you already good at? And what do you want to bring that to the table? So my coach Mun, another thing that he did well is humor. And something that he taught me was called punch faces. So when you're giving a speech to an international audience, there's a lot of things that don't translate. So I don't know what your grading system is, but in America it's called F, like the A, B, C, D, E, F, right? But I think in Moscow, what do you use?
1 to 5.
1 to 5. So 5's the worst, right?
No.
Oh, 5's the best, and 1's the worst. Okay. That makes so much more sense than the alphabet. We should do that. Okay, but for example, so these are the little nuances that you have to know when you're giving a contest speech. I'm sorry. Oh. For Mun, he taught me all of the different nuances to speak to an audience member. Woo, blue.
Do you need to project to show Josephine?
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll talk about this in a little bit. So if you want to contact a coach, I think the best thing you can do is to look at their speeches, who they have worked with, what your strengths and weaknesses are. So if you want to do a chart, write down, do a split your paper in half, write your strengths and speeches, and then write your weaknesses, and then find a coach that has your weaknesses. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about is how to pick a topic. Now, I went to lunch with one of my friends after the contest, and he said, you know, I'm never going to win this contest, and he's actually a very good speaker. He said, I'm never going to win this contest because I don't have a captivating speech topic. There's nothing that happened in my life that I can talk about that's amazing, right? He said, basically, there's no death in the family, there's never been any kind of diseases, no divorces, there's no sob story, so he couldn't write a speech. But this is actually a very common misconception, because in Toastmasters, the best speech topics are the most broad and general. What can relate to the general audience the most? So the questions that you want to ask when you're choosing your topic is, what is the lessons that you have learned from your parents? What is the lessons that you have learned from your teacher? What are the lessons that you learned from your friends, your dog, your experiences, your hobbies? So things that people can relate. So I Will Be There was about friendships. Now, how many of you have friends? Okay, good. That means that you can relate, maybe not the gas tank part, but you can relate to having a friend that you really love, to having a friend that can support you, right? So the whole topic was about friendship. Now, let's talk about, does anybody have a speech that they have given recently? Okay, all of you should be raising your hand. Okay, so let's talk about that. So what is the message of your speech? What was the topic of your speech?
Actually, it was from the advanced panel, and
Okay.
it was about interpersonal communication, so how to communicate well, so to say.
So it was a speech on how to speak.
How to build a communication among like two people, two parties.
Right, among two parties. So this is something that is very common because we all have interpersonal interactions every single day. So this is a very common topic. But if you're not relatable, people are not going to care about you. Now you all hear about crazy speeches about death, right? And then everybody thinks that you need a sob story. But really, I think up until like 10 years ago, a lot of the speeches that won was about death, disease, or divorce. But now the new rule in Toastmasters is to stay away from those three topics. You want to talk about something that is fun and something that's engaging, something that everyone in the world can relate to, because this is truly an international organization. What other topics have you spoken about? Yes, please.
I did a topic on my trip to Georgia.
Okay, to Georgia. I could definitely not relate to that. I'm just kidding. Okay, so what was that about?
Just like a series of like small fun stories about like what I experienced there.
Okay, wonderful. So that's also awesome.
Just yesterday I gave a nice workshop on core values of a person, why it's important to have ones and to follow them.
Yes, true. We should all have like a general guideline for why we shouldn't go murder people. So that's good. But in show speeches, when you talk about a topic, you want to choose something that is a very short piece of information that you want. So show speeches are 5 to 7 minutes. That's not a lot of time. So you can only pick one. In a keynote speech, it's different. This morning I gave a keynote speech and then I gave 3 topics, right? But for a show speech, for Toastmasters competition, you want one message, one topic. So I could have actually taken my keynote this morning and divided that up to 3 different speeches. Go with the flow is a separate speech. Be an amateur is another speech. And just keep going is another speech, right? So when you're doing show speeches, you want to reiterate what your topic is. And also, you want to make sure that you choose a topic that everybody can do. It can't be too difficult, because you don't want to tell people to do something too difficult. So stay away from like, you should lose weight, or that's too difficult. You should, I don't know, if you like, go get 5 degrees, or you don't want to do anything crazy like that. You want to make sure that it's, keep it in, be a good friend, show up for your friend, be a nice brother or sister to someone. So very easy, general topics. It seems really boring, but if you have great stories attached to them, you can make very simple topics very interesting. But you don't want to have people think too much in Toastmasters. You want to just have them be entertained and then just have topics.
Don't you think it's a problem? It's a growing trend that people don't think too much?
That is absolutely correct, but we are not going to solve that problem. So what other topics would you think is a good topic? Yes?
My last speech was about how to recognize the liar by non-verbal gestures.
What?
I'm sorry, one more time.
I don't understand your question.
No, it was good. I think I caught some of that, but it's what topics have you given? So we're thinking about topics that would be good for show speeches. Yes.
I can try. My last topic, my last speech topic was about a book that I fell in love with.
Fantastic.
And I was really in this topic. I was in love with this topic when I was writing the script, and it was a challenge for me because I had some problems with my voice before the 5th project. But while presenting it, I felt a lot of strength, and the audience felt it. It was really something.
Okay, so this can actually go two different ways. The reading a book that you love. So we have all read a book that we've loved before, or heard a story, or watched a movie that we fell in love with. Or it could be about the lesson in the book itself, right? So it can go two different directions. I heard an excellent speech once talking about Beauty and the Beast. Have you ever seen that movie? Yeah. So you can actually take lessons that you experience within these stories and then make that into a speech topic. So Beauty and the Beast, this speech was about not judging other people by what they look like, right? Because that's the main story about Beauty and the Beast. So this is something that you want to think about, the lessons that you have learned, but something that can relate to everyone. Is there any other? Yes?
I can't resist speaking about something deep and philosophical.
Okay.
So my last topic was something about an individual perception of age. How I perceive my own age from my own perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
how people relate to that.
The perspectives.
Yeah.
About how you're perceived.
Yeah.
That is actually a very relatable topic.
How I perceive myself.
How you perceive yourself and how others perceive you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's actually a very relatable topic because I think we all have our own perceptions of ourselves and how other people view us. So if you want to think about topics, just write down all of the lessons that you have learned. It could be very easy, like a lesson that you learned from your dog. My dog always forgives me. I accidentally kick her, I forget to feed her, I forget to take her on a walk, but no matter what, she's always going to love me, right? So this is a lesson that I learned from my dog. So it could be as easy as that. And then you can take that and expand it into a bigger workshop. Let's have one more topic that you can think of. Yes, ma'am.
My last speech was about the underwater reefs of synchronized interpretation, and the main message was the responsibility of your profession, if it's public.
I'm sorry, it's a what in this?
A responsibility of your profession if it's public.
Responsibility of your profession. That's pretty good too, because we all have our professions, like we have to eat, we have to have jobs to live, right? So that's responsibility is actually a very good topic. And as you can see, you can take any experience, any story, and then find the lesson within there. And a lot of the stories that we have, sometimes they have several different messages. So this morning I talked about a story, let's see, my first story was about how my mom was mad that I wasn't getting good grades and then she just decided to go with the flow, right? Another part of that story was that actually when I brought that to my dad, he said, "You're going to be fine." He said, when I brought home that F, my dad was like, "It's going to be okay. When you grow older, you're going to find something that you're actually really, really good at. And don't worry about it." So that would have been a completely different message, right? So each message has a different, or each story has several different messages. So you want to think about the story you like to tell, and then see all of the different messages that you want to come out of that. But you're using that as an example. I thought I saw, yes.
Can we ask questions now? Or
Yes, you can ask questions
okay,
whenever.
So you're talking about choosing a topic that would be a good message for a show speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
What about when you practice in your club and you have those 10 presentations, for example, when you're going through the CC manual, would you also recommend the same thing, like choosing general topics, or would you encourage people to think about deeper, more philosophical
You can.
subjects?
And I mean, philosophical questions can be, can also be simplified because just in general, writing a speech and writing a essay or a book are very different. So a speech has to be very simple, and I'm going to talk about that when we talk about structure, but a speech has to be very redundant because words are very fleeting. It just goes away after and then you can forget about it, right? So you have to repeat the same thing over and over. You tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and you told them what you told them, right? So it has to be, even if it's a big philosophical idea, you want to simplify it and be redundant.
Well, not even like philosophical, but you mentioned about losing weight. If you want to talk about food
Sure.
or diets and something like that, so
Oh,
that's
yeah.
kind of serious too.
Absolutely. So there's different types of speeches, and I'm just talking about show speeches because we're just talking about one, but you can also do an informative one. How to lose weight. eat less.
It's interesting that you said that Toastmasters need to be entertained, and I just wanted kind of to clarify, so they still want to have some serious
Oh
stuff,
yes,
right?
absolutely. This is just for show speeches.
Okay, thank
Yes.
Speaking of which, so do you see a more serious speech winning the international contest? Because having watched a number of winning speeches, they are exactly what you're describing. They're show speeches, very general, very high level, like you just listen to it, forget about it, and move on, right? But something deeper, like, is it possible?
Perhaps you can try. I mean, you can. let me actually tell you a story. There's 10 speeches in the finals. The first speaker that went up was an excellent speaker, and she spoke, and this was like her first year in Toastmasters, so she had never known this like broad and general rule. So she talked about domestic violence. It's a very heavy topic. And she talked about how her personal experience with it, other people's experience with it. Now this would have been an excellent TED Talk. But in the Toastmasters world, she didn't place because even though she did an amazing job, there was no humor in it. Everybody was really depressed after. Like, please crack a joke, you know? So it just seemed a little off. So you really want to think about your audience because there are other platforms to do that. There are other platforms like TED Talks or universities or going to a charity organization about on domestic violence and give that speech. So she definitely had a speech that worked in other platforms. Toastmasters, it was really depressing that we're all just sitting there like, that poor lady. Yes.
Speaking of which, it's still kind of, I mean, the judges have their own rules and they have the criteria according to which they're going to judge. Humor is not like the biggest one, so she did everything else, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
gestures and the language and everything. So, I mean, is there a special something that I don't know about judges rules, like, you know, humor? Everyone has to be super happy about.
Yeah, they're unwritten rules. Okay, so the unwritten rules is that you have to be funny.
Okay.
You have to be entertaining, you have to keep my attention. So those are the unwritten rules, right? But she did an excellent job in all the other things, but if you can't win people over, you can have a perfect speech. But if nobody connects with you, that's probably the biggest thing is that you have to connect with the audience. And the fastest and easiest way to do that is with humor. You did an excellent job doing the humor. Like you, right here. Hello. What's her name? Okay, sorry, I have to point this out. This, like, half of these sound like my ballet teachers' names, and I'm getting anxious. Like Natalia, like Tatiana, these are all like Russian ballet teachers in the States, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But you did an excellent job because when you, the first time you make an audience member laugh or the audience laugh, you're immediately connecting with them. So you automatically care about the person more, you care about what they're going to say more, because no matter what you say, if the audience doesn't care about you, they're not going to listen. So those are the unwritten rules of the Toastmasters speech contest. Any other questions about topic? Yes.
What would you suggest in project number 7? It's research your topic. It's a quite sophisticated, complicated matter.
Sure.
Because last time when I was delivering it, I chose a really sophisticated topic. It was about
very difficult one.
Financial analysis.
Oh wow!
Actually, I really did my best. I tried to do it as easy as like audience friendly as possible, but and at some moments I was expecting people to be like, wow, that's really interesting, but instead I was facing people sitting like that
with the doe eye.
Well,
they probably weren't understanding you like me, right?
But in order to meet the objectives, you have to research your topic. You have to present something a little bit more sophisticated than probably just general social matters. So what would you suggest in such?
That's a really good question. Did everybody hear what she said? Yeah. She's doing the researcher topic. And like I said, all of the speeches that when you go through your manual, it doesn't have to be a show speech. So the researcher topic could be for some other speech. And you know, I did my researcher topic on point shoes, you know, on ballet shoes, and I didn't have to really research that topic. I just said, that's from my life. I know what this is. But if you were to make researcher topic fun, you can make any speech fun. That should be the goal. You know, is there traffic school here? Traffic school? Okay. So I got a lot of tickets when I drive, so I have to go to these all-day traffic schools, and it's basically talking about all of the rules of the road, and it's the most boring topic of your life, right? But you can still make that fun. The person that was doing this was humorous. They made a joke about it. They talked about different experiences. So really, you can take any topic and then add humor, add stories, and then makes it more personable. Then that's really what you want to do, because the whole point of listening to his speech is because you don't want to read about it, right? You want to be kind of entertained. Okay, so he keeps on going. So let's next, if you don't have any more questions about how to choose a topic, let's talk about structure. So like I said, there's a couple different methods on how to structure a speech. So this morning when I did the keynote speech, it was the three example method. So usually you start out with the introduction, and the introduction is basically explaining what you're going to be talking about. And you want to do that at the beginning, as soon as you can, because when you introduce that, the audience members know what's in it for them. Because the speech is ultimately not about you, it's about the audience. So the audience wants to know right away, what's in it for me? Am I going to be entertained? Am I going to learn something? Am I going to be able to do something after this speech? Why am I listening to you? Right? So you want to talk about what is in it for the audience first. That's the introduction. Tell them what you're going to tell them. And then the middle structure, this is where it varies. So the three example structure is exactly what it sounds like. You give 3 different stories, and then the lessons after that. And then you end it with the conclusion, which is wrapping it up, and then also making sure that everybody understands even the last thing you want them to remember. The last words linger. The second structure that you want to do is, starting with the introduction, have one long story method. Those of you who saw I Will Be There, that's a long story method, because it starts out from when I was a kid and then how my friend and I went through our entire childhood and high school and then college, and how we had a falling out and then we came back together later on at the end. So that's one long story. The long story method is effective. So both are just as effective, but you want to be redundant, like I said. So the topic that you choose, or the message you want to say it throughout your speech. So this is called the foundational phrase. So foundational phrase for I will be there is I will be there. So I say that several times throughout so that people remember what it's about. You want to remind the audience what it is. So even if I took today's speech and I cut it into different speeches, go with the flow would be my foundational phrase. So I'd say go with the flow. But you know, go with the flow. And then the last one was just keep going. I was panicking inside, but I just kept going. And then I am entering into panic mode, but I just kept going. So you want to keep reminding the audience. And in an essay form or like a written form, it's very redundant. So you don't have to do that in the written form. But when you're speaking it, people want to remember what that is. So it sounds almost silly when you're repeating yourself over and over again, but that's really the only way to be remembered. So different structures that you want to use as well, depending on the type of speech and the person that the audience members. You can do 3 different topics, like I did this morning, or you can do one topic and then you want to reverberate that throughout the speech. Now, when you gave your speech, that was a long story method. I thought that was really well done. How you started out with, when I was young, I did the horses, yay, I fell, didn't want to go again, and then your trainer, and then you did that story. So that's a long story method, even though that was a very short speech. And another thing that you want to introduce, in a lot of these speeches, the lesson that comes, the lesson that you learn, and you did this very well, you want to have the lesson come from someone else. You don't want that to be yourself. Like, you don't want to say, oh, and then I realized that this happened and I'm amazing. You know, you want to make sure that the lesson is learned from either an example or some other guru. They call this a guru in the speech method, right? So the lesson in I Will Be There was the experience of me falling out with my friend. So I fell out with my friend and I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I let I was such a bad friend that I didn't get to see her again. Now you're all going to go home and watch his speech. Half of you have no idea what I'm talking about. But you want to make sure that when you introduce the lesson, there is a guru. So this is just a storytelling method. Oh, it's hot in here. I'm either really hot in Moscow or like really cold because I'm wearing like all of my clothes right now. I brought 4 outfits for 4 days and I'm wearing all of them. Okay, so okay, and another way, yes.
Just a quick question. What's the opposite of the long story method?
The long story method is a 3 example method.
Okay. That's the opposite, right?
Yes. So you can either do 3 or 5. I don't know why, but the human brain remembers 3s and 5s. Anything more than that, that's too much in a speech. If it's a written form, then you can do like top 10 things to do this. But if you want to keep it to 3 or 5. 3 usually if it's a shorter speech. If it's like a 45-minute keynote, then you can do up to 5. But anything more than that is just way too much. Yes.
When you were choosing a method for your I will be there speech, did you deliberately chose this structure because you like it and you tend to take it naturally, or it was simply advised to you by a coach?
No, I just did it because I wanted to tell the full story from when that, and 5 to 7 minutes is not very long, so yeah. I had to choose either one. For the keynote, I did the 3-story method. So it just depends on how much time you have, what kind of story you have, how much time you want to spend on a story, and if it's worth telling the entire thing. And thank you for bringing that up. Like, I will be there. The way that I actually started this speech was with that story. I didn't know what the lesson was going to be, but I really wanted to tell this gas tank story because it's a story that is retold on my birthday every year because everybody wants to make fun of you on your birthday. But I did this speech and I didn't know what the topic was going to be. So I came up with this story first, and then I thought the first thing was, okay, so it is a true story, but what actually happened at the end was that Jenna and I both didn't know that there wasn't gas in there, and then we went back to the gas station, and we had to admit to the cashier that we didn't know that you're supposed to put gas in the gas tank. So the first topic that I thought of from that story was, oh, don't be afraid to look stupid. That was the original message, but it didn't fit quite well. So I changed it to friendship. So that's something that, and I changed that after I watched my best friend growing up, Jenna. I watched her wedding video on Facebook. It just came up one day, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I wasn't invited to her wedding. You know, I can't believe that I had this like incredible 10-year relationship with her, and I wasn't invited to her wedding. That made me really sad, and then that actually taught me the lesson, and we ended up becoming friends again, and then that was all fine, but then that became the story. So your speech, great speeches are not written. They're rewritten. Yeah, so you have to take a speech and then you have to rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it until you find that nugget of gold in there.
Do you think you chose friendship over stupidity because everyone wants to be a friend to someone and doesn't want to be stupid? Can it be related?
Yes, so that's a good question. You're asking why I chose friendship over stupidity, right?
Well, it's obvious, but not so.
Yeah. So I chose friendship because my heart tugged to that story. That my heart really went out to that story because it was such like a wonderful story for me that I wanted to tell that story, and that's really important because when you're passionate about your story and your subject, then it really comes through. The stupidity one would have been a funny story, and it would have been well written, and it would have been fun for me to tell and everything, but really my heart was in the other one. That's why I chose that.
And do you think it's better to relate to positive emotions rather than negative, like divorce, disease, etc.?
But you know, who is familiar with the hero's journey? Okay, so 2 people. So the hero's journey is the storyline that every single movie goes through. It's where the protagonist starts out in the normal setting, then something happens that encourages this person to go on this journey. So they go on this journey, and then they go through trials and tribulations, and then they come out at the end. Every movie, every storyline goes through the same thing. Your speeches can do the same thing, right? So there has to be some kind of negative emotion in order for you to find the reason to change or find a reason to learn the lesson. So there is, in every story, even if it's minute, like, oh, same, it says, I will be there. Those 4 words can help you make a friend. And if you say it enough times and follow through, you will make a lifelong friend. That's the beginning and that's the end. But at the end, that was when, after I went through the entire journey with my best friend, and then with the falling out and then coming back together, at the very end, when I said that, I wish I could have said, I will be there. Those 4 words can help you make a friend. Those 4 words, there are 4 words. What did I want to say? What did I want to say? Okay, I wanted to change the ending to be a little bit different. There are 4 words that I wanted to say to a friend. And then I got to say it at the end, right? I will be there. So to actually say that to Jenna, none of this will actually make sense unless you've actually seen the speech, but I wanted to change the ending. But if I had another week of editing, then I probably would have come up with that, because I don't recommend this, but I was changing the speech up until the night before I actually gave the speech. So I think if I had another week, then that's what I would have changed.
Just usually don't have enough time.
Yes, because you don't get that much time between the semifinals and the finals.
I mean, you always don't have time.
No, you never have enough time, right? That's true. You never have enough time.
Excuse me, do you have any ritual before coming to the stage? Your personal ritual?
Oh, rituals. I used to do this thing where I would write down my speech on a blank, like whatever piece of paper I can find. Once I got to the contest, I would start writing out my speech. And the reason I did that was not because I need to memorize it further, but because I wanted to concentrate on the speech and not on anything else. So that I didn't want to go somewhere else, so that's what I would do, just write my speech out. And people would think that I'm writing my speech there, and I'm like, yeah, I just wrote this, But that's the only ritual that I have, is just rewrite my speeches throughout. But I know some other people are like, don't eat this and wear this underwear, and strange rituals.
We have such sophisticated speakers here who practice extemporaneous way of speaking without any script.
That's amazing. I think that's a really good way to give a speech too, but just not a show speech. Yes?
I have a general question. Has it happened so that, or does it usually happen with you that other Toastmasters, if you have not met them before, recognize you that you are a Toastmaster, or do you recognize others, or do you start counting their R's and O's and stuff like that? Because you are I understand that your mother tongue is English.
Yes.
Yeah.
I try to turn off my Toastmaster-e-ness outside of Toastmasters, but I do catch a lot of ums usually on camera, or when I'm watching people speak, I do catch that. Was your first question, do people recognize?
Do you recognize, do I
recognize
other Toastmasters?
Other Toastmasters?
Follow Toastmasters on the street.
Oh, do I? No, I do not have that superpower. But I do recognize good speakers. I do and it's really hard. Once you're in Toastmasters, you evaluate every speech that you see. And I actually saw several very good speakers that own businesses, and some people are great business people and terrible speakers, and then you evaluate those too. So, I think everybody should be in Toastmasters. I know, but sometimes you just forget. Huh?
If you had a boss, I would have asked, do you count his mistakes or not? But
just an everyday speech? No, I don't do that. Only when I'm watching an actual speech, I do that. I automatically go into evaluator mode. But in the normal everyday, I don't even speak perfectly, so yeah, no, I don't do that.
Josephine, do you have any techniques to fight nervousness? Because on your performance you looked really confident, like there was nothing that could possibly distract you from your performance. Do you have any special things?
It's a lie. I'm totally nervous all the time. Just people just don't know it. But this is what I heard. I actually did some of the world champions, they shared their tips, but I don't mind being nervous anymore. The nervousness doesn't go away. It's just you learn to use it to your advantage. Because if you're not nervous, you're more likely to mess up. Like, I actually do better on stage when I'm nervous than when I'm trying to do it in the hotel room by myself. My mom knows, and she's like, oh, you're going to be terrible today. But I do better. So you want to always understand that your nerves are there to help you. And you just have to get, the butterflies to fly in formation,
I mean, it's just excitement, but when you are really, you are like petrified, you forget your words, you can't remember your text. It's like the different kind of nerves.
Yes, that's true. And one of the world champions told me this, is that there is a 10x rule. What the 10x rule is that what you think you look like on stage, it's 10 times better. Like how nervous you think you are on the inside is actually not visible at all. Because you obviously could not tell that I was nervous this morning. I was nervous. So it's something that you think in your head. So just remember that. Just remember that the audience doesn't see what you feel. And you want to make sure that you can fake it till you make it. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. That really hurt. Like, even if it's very small, you want to have some negative emotions in order to show the audience empathy.
So the trick is to grab attention with negatives and then bring it to positives.
Yeah, that's right. You want to make sure that they understand. Yeah, exactly. So you want to do some negative emotions. And, it's giving a really good speech is like ripping your heart open and showing the audience what's in it, right? So that is what it is, because it's really hard to admit that you're wrong. It's really hard to admit that you went through a bad patch and you're a bad person and you didn't know this, and it's really bad. It's really hurtful to admit those things. But the more vulnerable and authentic you are in front of the audience, the more you can connect to them, because all of these emotions are universal and we all understand them. So your heart goes out to it. Think about your favorite movie, right? Like, why do you love the person that is the protagonist? It's because they're experiencing, even if it's not the same experiences that you went through, it's the same emotions that you could have gone through. So you want to make sure that you want to bring all of the human experiences within the speech, and that's a challenge when it comes to 5 to 7 minutes, but you can definitely do it. And then the structure is just there so that you don't lose the audience. You're just making sure that you're with them. Because if you ramble on indefinitely, kind of like how I'm doing right now, then you might lose them. Okay, so now we talked about structure. Anybody else has questions about structure?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. They are quite related, actually.
Sure.
Since you mentioned that most speeches, like they become sort of Toastmaster speeches, I want to ask you, how do you think that aligns with the goal of teaching people to speak in public in the real world, as opposed to Toastmasters becoming an end in itself? And what was your primary motivation for entering the contest? Was it winning Toastmasters, or was it something outside of Toastmasters?
I never had intentions to actually win at all. And everybody says that, but I promise, I really didn't try to win or anything. It was because, one, it was really fun for me. Entering a competition is really fun because you become a better speaker. You're in front of an audience that you've never spoken in front of before, and it challenges you to new heights and challenges you to become better. So I promise you, if you enter into a contest and go through the entire thing, because there's 7 levels in the competition, you will come out a better speaker. So that was my main motivation.
At what stage did you hire a coach?
After I won division. And it was nice because he was a friend of mine and I was already a fan, so.
The title of my last speech was Know Our Audience. And I spoke about our club to our members of our club. And did you have any such experience to speak with your club, to addressing to your members?
Yes. So it is very important to cater to your audience, but if you have a very general message, then you can talk to an international group. It's just, you have to just find the most human topic possible. But you know, when I started the keynote this morning, I said, I'm in Moscow, you guys all know what that is, right? And I talked about eating a lot, and I know you all can relate to that because I saw you guys eating last night. And I was like, man, I am outdone. That's hard to do. So we talked about the food, and I talked about, you know, the weather, so you all can relate to that. So that was a little tweak in my speech, because I've given this speech before, but obviously I didn't talk anything about Russia. So you want to tweak your speech a little bit according to who you're talking to and your audience. Yes?
Did we have to adjust any specific emotions or like your faces, facial expressions for the international audience?
That's a great question. I was going to talk about that in performance, but I'll touch on that right now. You want to talk the way that you talk. And, you know, we had dinner last night, so you know how I talk, right? I talk like this. I really do. So that's how I'm going to give a speech. But if you're not animated and you try to be like that, it looks awkward. When I was watching all of the other champion speeches, when I was practicing for my own, I noticed that most of them talk very authoritatively. They're funny, but they don't really use their facial expression very much. If I tried to be like that, then I would not have placed. I would not have placed, because it doesn't look authentic to me. But I normally talk like this, so it seems more natural.
But I'm more so talking about ambiguous expressions. Like, for instance, it may be great in United States culture, in Russia, right?
Oh,
but
gestures.
like gestures, facial expressions. For instance, I recall that in Bulgaria, if I'm not mistaken, they nod like this for yes and like this for no, right? So did you have any funny experiences along this line, where you actually had to change to suit for the international audience?
No, I didn't. Does this translate? Is this translating here? Yeah, that's a really great question, because I haven't run into that yet, but probably should research that a little bit before I come to places. And you know, actually, when I was coming to Russia, some of my friends were like, yeah, don't smile over there. And I was like, okay. It's like, we're doing business over here, and they're like, they want strong women that just, you know, they like strong women. And I was like, I can't do it, because I'm just naturally a smiley person, but that's what people told me. I didn't follow it because that's just not me.
We are shocked.
You know, really? Yeah.
Really,
no, I think that's like a misconception, because I just did whatever I wanted.
Actually, we used to smile here in Moscow. Actually, when we meet somebody, we say hello, we smile.
Really?
Yeah.
And then even yesterday,
yeah,
because even yesterday when we were talking, they're like, yeah, don't smile at strangers. That's weird. But in America, that's what we do. Like, we're like, hey, okay, no, all right.
Okay, maybe smiling to a stranger, it's not such a common thing here in Russia.
Yeah.
Really so, but when we meet some person whom we know, of course,
yes. Well, now I know that, but it's like before, like these are like just things that I didn't know. But I think if you're a genuine person, and you know, if you research a little bit, like in Korea, when you drink with someone, you're not supposed to reject a drink. So you just drink until you get plastered. But like you can't you can't refuse a drink from someone, so you just keep drinking, right? So these are just like little common things that you have to think about when you go to different places.
But actually, it's the best advice I have ever heard in my life to some foreign person, like, don't smile in Russia. It's like the best advice I have ever heard. Actually.
Really?
Yeah.
I was like, okay. The whole time I'm there, don't smile? Okay. But yeah, it is very interesting. But thank you for bringing that up. That's something that you want to research a little bit. That's why we have Google. What do you not want to do in Russia? Okay. Anything else in terms of structure or topic?
what's the best end of the speech, of the winning speech?
So this is the best end.
Yeah.
This is what I heard. This is one of the best advice I got while I was preparing for the speech. You want to start with humor, you give 3 points, and you end with heart. So you want to give something that the audience can take home with, something that is, you know, nice and fluffy, and you want to end going, ah, okay. So that's anything with heart, anything that draws the emotions out. That's what you want to end with. Anything else with structure? Okay, so let's talk about performance. So a great performance, all it is practice. You practice until you die. Like you practice, practice, practice. When I practiced the speech, I could do it in my sleep. Because when I was practicing for the championship, I would say it in my car, my shower head is totally tired of hearing my speech. Like everywhere I go, I'm just kind of mumbling under my breath. But the way that I practiced was the way that I practiced dance when I was younger. So the way that we did it was sometimes we would turn off the music because that's a cue. So we would turn off the music and then we would dance without music. And then we would do the dance twice as fast. And then we'd do the dance twice as slow. And then we would cut up the dance in different sections. And then we would rearrange them and then do it in different order. And the reason why we did this was because we want to completely internalize every single choreographed word. This does not go with every single speech. This doesn't go with every speech because there's a place for these spontaneous speeches where you just have bullet points and then you kind of go off the cuff. That's a speech that you can also give too. But for a show speech, you want to make sure that every single word and every single movement is choreographed and thought out. So you want to practice as much as you can because the whole point of practicing that much is that when you step on stage, you're not thinking about the words at all. You're actually reliving what you are telling the audience. And reliving it means you can call it acting, I guess, but then you want to have the real emotions that come out and the real lessons and the real thought process of what you were thinking when that was happening. And that can only come through when you're not thinking about the words.
So do you think that you, so to say, should learn by heart your topic? Is it so?
Learn by heart?
Not
So
only
to
the
say,
topic, but every word and every
yes.
expression.
So exactly. So just for show speeches, though.
Yeah,
like right now, this is off the cuff, right? So I generally have an idea of what I'm talking about, and then we're kind of going off of what you guys want to talk about.
So, for example, when you were preparing for the international contest, did you like almost learn by heart your speech, and you just were using just your emotions being on the stage?
Oh, I didn't almost learn it by heart. I definitely
you learned it by heart. Okay.
Did you have a script for it?
Yes.
Word by word.
Word by word, and this is the mistake that I made last year. Was that last year I didn't memorize the speech. Last year all I did was, this is what I'm going to talk about. I have the introduction and the conclusion memorized, and then in the middle part I kind of have bullet points and I know the story that I'm going to talk about, right? And that works fine in most speeches. Like this morning when I gave the keynote, that was kind of how I did it here.
So the script is super important for any speaker.
Is very important.
Because there are people who even don't prepare the script of your speech, and for example, I'm vice president education of my club, and I used to write something like, please send me the script of your speech, or send the script of your speech to your personal evaluator, and the person just says, I don't have a script.
Okay.
So I'm not at all agree with this. That's why I'm asking you about the script. Is it like crucially important? And you say yes.
Only for the show speeches. Only for show speeches. And if you're doing something that is at a very high risk, like TED Talks or anything that's like, very important, you want to make sure that you memorize the script. Absolutely.
Just a comment on this. Since we all come to learn at Toastmasters, for some it may actually be their stretch and their challenge to go without speech.
That's true.
Right, so I can speak for myself. Like I can do perfectly well if I have a written script and I practice through it. But for me, it's much more interesting and challenging
to do it
if
without
I just go off the cuff and try to make it look as if it was.
But it depends on the level, of course. That's why I asked about your preparation on the international contest.
So, like even for show speeches, I have several different scripts. So it never is the first version. I have about like 10 different versions. And I have given it all throughout, and then just basically the best one, I keep the best one. So a script is very important. It's like you have to write it and rewrite. Editing is so painful because you might start out with an amazing story. That's what you love. And then you build an entire speech around it. And then you realize at the end that that story that you started with doesn't even fit in the rest of the speech. So you have to cut that out. So it's like cutting out your babies. Like, it's like really painful to edit. But that's what you have to do. In speeches, you have to keep rewriting. That's the best advice. If you can remember one thing going out here, edit your speech. Edit your speech. Because it never is perfect at the beginning. Yes?
When you were practicing your script, was it the same for the division contest as the international, or was it a completely new one?
So that's a great question too. In Toastmasters rule, you have to have one speech up until the semifinals, and you have to have a completely new original speech for the finals. So those of you who have seen the final speech, that wasn't the speech that I competed in all the way up to that level. That was the first time I gave it in front of a live audience.
And when you're doing the script, you are rewriting it, do you practice it in front of a mirror or just vocalizing somehow? Because it sounds different when you write it or when you tell it.
I do both. So another great thing to do is that when you're looking at yourself in the mirror, that's actually not a true view of yourself. Yeah. So when you tape yourself, that's a better way to see, because you might just do this like one weird thing all the time, and you have no idea you're doing it. But if you're watching the camera, then you can see, oh, I should not do that. Stop it. You know.
Actually, I recently attended a workshop by some experienced speaker, and he was pointing out that when we look at ourselves, our brain automatically adjusts our facial expression to the way we like to see ourselves. Okay,
it's like,
so
oh yeah, yes. That's definitely true. So the camera is a really good tool, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the best way to see yourself in a true way. And you will hate it. I hate watching myself. I hate listening to myself. Yeah, but you have to do it to see all the weird things. Yes.
Have you had the experience of forgetting a line?
Oh yeah.
Speech? And what did you do?
Oh, I just make something up. I forgot my line right now. You know, it's just you want to keep going, because if there's nothing worse than just freezing.
There is the danger when you forget your line. You remember. Well, it's really difficult to just like you made up line to the rest of the text.
That is so true. And this is the scary part about writing a speech, about scripting your speech.
Easy to stumble.
Yeah, because if you miss one word, it throws off your whole speech. So that's why I emphasize practicing. You have to practice where it's like you can really do it in your sleep. So in a show speech, you want to be able to practice the same way that I used to dance. You want to practice it twice as fast, and then you want to practice it twice as slow. And when you practice, you can cut your speech up in different sections and just say, you know, have a buddy, and then have them say like, okay, recite section 7, recite section 3. So you want to be that exact, and then there's no way you're going to mess that up if you've gotten to that level where you know every single word. So you want to get there. But that's why going off the script is sometimes good too. If you don't have a lot of time to practice, just have your bullet points and go off of that.
Excuse me, have you any regrets after performing the speech at the finals about the performance of your speech?
I'm sorry, can you say that?
Have you any regrets about the performance of your speech?
Regrets. I don't regret. For the final speech, I thought of this after, but the beginning and the end